Hello everyone, I hope you are doing well today. In this video, we're discussing all things 4.1.1, official news, leaks, and my thoughts on the upcoming patch. And if we're being honest here, based off some of these leaks, it could be a really awesome month or two. Now, before we get into it, if you are enjoying the content, feel free to subscribe. I have memberships open if you'd like to go the extra mile, and feel free to join the community Discord. I will have a link to that in the description, and I would absolutely love to have you there. Besides that, though, let's get into the news. Now, on the official side of things, we actually unfortunately didn't get too much information. They basically just split the space combat mission card into four different cards. So we now have the patrol missions, space combat mission that is redacted, we have ambush, and we have UEE training missions. Now, we actually have a ton of information on this news on the leak side of things. So unfortunately for the official news, that's going to be it for this video. We are going to be moving on to leaks now. So, a disclaimer, we are talking about things that have not been revealed yet. And if you do want to stay a little safe from spoilers, I would click off the video now. But for anyone that is interested in some more details, we have a ton here. So, feel free to stick around for that. Now, getting into the leaks, I first want to talk about some of the ships that we're going to get for Invictus launch week. So, just a heads up, these leaks are for Invictus, not necessarily for 4.1.1. They could come in that patch, but these will be in mid to late May when we have Invictus. First things first is the Starlancer attack. I don't think that's any surprise to anyone after the last monthly report, but I'm very glad to see that that will be flyable for this Invictus launch week. The next ship is the Guardian. It is actually a variant of the Guardian that is more missile focused. I think this is exciting. We don't have much news on it, but regardless, I think it'll be cool to have a Guardian variant with that missile focus. The third one, though, is definitely the most unexpected, and that is the Anvil Paladin. That should be flyable this Invictus launch week. Now, if you guys remember, this ship was only announced just a few months ago, and it is already making its way into the PU in a seriously short amount of time. Invictus is a military themed event, so each of these three ships being more combat oriented makes complete sense. And I am really loving the lineup so far. Of course, there is potential some more flyable ships at Invictus. As a matter of fact, we did get some news on the Grey Cat Cav. Nothing much, nothing that says it'll be at Invictus, but it is in the files somewhere. And we actually do know what the next display ship should be, or at least one of the next display ships is, and that is our first base building ship, the Starlancer BLD. Now, this absolutely doesn't confirm that we will get base building this patch or anytime soon, and I wouldn't expect this ship to even release to us before base building, but it does look like it will be on display, so that could be really neat, especially having it next to the Starlancer Max intact. It'd be really cool having those in the showroom. Now, before we move on, I did want to mention one ship, and that is the Perseus. Now, as we know, this ship was in white box or left white box at the start of March and is in gray box currently. That basically confirms that it won't be flyable at Invictus. And initially, I did think that we might see it as a display ship, but given the fact that it is not in the files currently, I am hesitant to say that I'm still confident in that statement. Of course, these are leaks, so take them with a grain of salt. This is not official news at all. But just to keep expectations in check, I did want to mention how there was no mention of the Perseus and the data mine leaks. So, for anyone wondering, that is any news on the Perseus. Now, in other news, we do have some leaks on the upcoming ships that are going to be added to Wicklow's reward pool. That being the Aegis Firebird, the Aegis Peregrine, the Crusader Intrepid, the Starlancer Max, and the Zeus ES and CL. These ships should also come with a special skin and better components like the ones we have currently in game do. But regardless, I'm just super glad to see some more ships in here. I think it'll be really nice to have that in the reward pool. Now, some quick info on Fleet Week 2025, just some of the logistical stuff. It should be during May 15th through the 27th at Area 18, and there should be an Idris tour on one of the rooftops there. Should be some nice things to see there. Not too much information that's crazy here, but just to give you a heads up, it should be at Area 18 this year. Now, back to some mission news. We're going to first start off with some of the details about the flight combat tutorial missions. These are named Gilly's Pilot School. This has numerous different missions ranging from basic single seat combat to Polaris level combat, and seems to be a format for players to learn the basics of combat through missions. I'm not sure how guided these will be, but I assume that there's going to be someone just kind of talking you through it in your ear, and it'll be an excellent idea for players just getting used to some of the complex details of combat. Now, these next two missions are something I'm super excited for, that being the ambush and security patrol missions, the one we talked about before with the roadmap update. The ambush missions are exactly what they say they are. They require you to hide your missions in order to set up an ambush and follow similar difficulty ratings to what we already have with combat missions in the game. They have different fail states for ambushing too early or too late as well, which I think will be neat. And then for the patrol missions, these will require you to search for enemies and their equipment. It should take you along a set path of sorts, but it doesn't seem we have too much information on the actual details of the mission. Regardless, I think it'll be pretty self-explanatory and a lot of fun for players, just having some more variation for combat missions. Something cool though that they mentioned in the leaks is a few different implementations of variations to certain missions. This includes things like having ace pilots spawn in with high-end loot, so if you shoot them down, you can obtain some decent loot. There can also be chicken ships, which if they escape the area may cause reinforcements to spawn in. And during some patrols, you might stumble upon things like derelict ships, as well as enemy or allied satellites that you might be ordered to interact with. This also includes two new communicators, that being Stows for Headhunters and Dispatcher Walton for Foxwell Security. Now, I am super excited about all of those. I've always kind of advocated for more variables when it comes to missions. And this doesn't necessarily mean that some of the older missions we have will have a ton of variables as well, but it does seem like these are supposed to be applied to the broad range missions rather than just the new missions. So I really hope we see that across the board. Regardless, again, I love seeing some more variations and having apparently some guidance with these two different communicators could be really cool, especially during these different combat missions. Talking some more about some missions, we actually have some information on the big main mission for Fleet Week towards Invictus, that being the Hunt the Polaris event. Apparently, this involves players preparing an ambush at a transient jump point, basically not letting the Polaris escape. The Polaris was apparently hijacked by frontier fighters, so they're trying to take it back to Pyro. So the whole idea is stopping them before they get to the transient jump point. And I think this could be cool because it'll offer you a lot of that really cool boarding combat, possibly for the Polaris, and maybe it'll even have a special interior similar to the Idris events. Outside of the event, though, we have to mention the fact that they talk about transient gem points for this mission. Of course, it doesn't necessarily mean that they will be in the game necessarily, but in order to defend or at least ambush a Polaris that's trying to get to a transient jump point, I would assume that they would actually want to have one like physically there. Maybe it's just more like a theoretical thing, like, oh yeah, they're headed to one, so don't let them escape, or it's going to be an actual transient jump point. I am, given the fact that we haven't seen a ton of new things in recent times, I'm going to go ahead and say that it's probably just going to be theoretical. But if we do see transient jump points in this new update, that could be really cool. Now, when it comes to the actual 4.1.1 events going on, it looks like we have a race to region event. To sum it up pretty quickly, it looks like it involves Rayari and the regeneration crisis, and you'll have to kind of side with a corporation in Stanton to compete with one another to actually get this solved. It does seem like there will be like a live counter for different corporations and the player contributions. And it does seem that maybe the leading corporation will have some sort of benefits involved with actually getting more research done, I suppose. Of course, we don't know much information on this, but having some sort of event that kind of affects the way or what's going on in the world is pretty cool, in my opinion. Now, it does seem there is some info on the pyro event of sorts, Argo's oddment event. There isn't much information here in the leaks, but it does say it involves radiation elements, so that could be really interesting. Not entirely sure if that would come with the patch, but regardless, if we did get radiation, I would be certainly excited for that. Now, the last thing I have here for mission stuff is that there is a new currency called physical scripts. This seems to be a new trading currency for the mercenary and the council guilds, basically lawful and unlawful, and it does seem that you'll be able to turn these in for certain rewards. Now, again, we don't necessarily know much information about this. It does sound it's going to be like very similar to Wicklow in some sort of way, shape, or form, but I'm super excited for this. Anything that mentions guilds and getting actual rewards for doing work for that guild is just the best thing ever. I'm super excited for that type of gameplay and reward system, and this seems like it might just be like a hint in that sort of direction. So, really excited for this, and I hope we get some more details about that soon. Now, moving along, we actually have a ton of new locations to dive into here. So, to start this off, we have new mining bases around Stanton. This includes 12 around Hurston, 12 around Crusader, 19 around ArtCorp, and 20 around Microtech. And then there will also be derelict mining compounds, 2 on Daymar, 2 on Aberdeen, 2 on Fuego, and 2 on Monarchs. And then when it comes to Pyro, there is going to be a total of 86 new abandoned remote mining bases, which is an insane number. These are going to be separated by regions. Unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be any information as to what regions these specifically are, but I wanted to give you the total number because it is really large and it's pretty nice to see that there's going to be some new places in Pyro. The last thing when it comes to locations is the fact that last week's sneak peek actually had a picture of a bit of an asteroid base. I think this was one of the mining bases around Stanton. I know a ton of people thought it was the Nick system, but just to give my 2 cents, I do think that this was just simply one of the pictures of these new mining bases. Now, one of the last big leaks we have before we get into just some final notes here is that there will be 4 new torpedoes, with one being size 12 apparently. This is pretty cool, and I'm glad to see some variation here. We don't really know what type of benefits each of these types of torpedoes offer, but I think it will be nice to have different torpedoes for different situations. So I think that's a really cool one as well. Now, finally, the last few things to note here are firstly mentions of Area 18's municipal works. I'm not too sure if this is relating to it just being in the files or in the game at all, but nonetheless, it is really cool to hear about. The next thing is apparently that desk workers are going to get some more dialogue so that players can interact with them and get some more information. Of course, we don't really know how this will work, but I'm all for having a bit more of an immersive and living world. The next thing mentioned is Moro Tour entries. Not entirely sure what that is. And then we also have some mentions of localization for escape pods. I literally don't care about anything as long as it has escape pods in the name. I get excited for it because I just can't wait for that. But the last thing we have here is that there is mention of Grey Cat Cav and the Anvil Paladin once more. Not entirely sure if the Gray Cat Cab is something we'll see at Invictus, possibly just given the fact that it is in the files, but we do know that the Anvil Paladin should be flyable at Invictus as well. Besides that, though, that is going to do it for this video or our 4.1.1 and all the official and leaked news so far. We should have some more information next week about this patch officially and an ISC or SCL from Jared. I also want to give a huge shout out to Danny, the one that actually puts this data mine information out there. It's really well structured and easy to read. And I think a lot of people in the community appreciate that information being that well put together and put out for all of us to read. So, again, thank you so much for that. I do want to hear your guys' thoughts on this patch. Are you excited for it, or are you kind of planning on skipping out on it, or maybe waiting till Invictus to hop in? I will try my best to get you guys some footage as soon as possible whenever it hits Wave 1 PTU. But besides that, we have a Starlancer attack video coming out this Saturday, just talking all things about the new dropship and some of the cool aspects of it that I'm looking forward to personally. And really, that is it for today. I really appreciate you being here and sticking around to the end. It always means the world to me. Feel free to check out the Star Citizen playlist if you want to check out some of my other content. But besides that, thank you so much for being here. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video.